Ch63 Everblaze. Sophie buried her head in her hands, trying to think of any reason she could be wrong. She'd visited Brandt, talked to him, and he'd creeped her out both times. He'd even told her, "I've seen you before," the first time she met him. Now she finally knew where. But his voice, she remembered her kidnapper's voice, and he hadn't sounded like Brandt, except Brandt had been sick when she'd visited, or he was trying to disguise it. He'd even stopped her from probing his memories. Was that because he was afraid of what she'd find? No, she whispered, repeating it over and over, like if she just said it enough times, it would suddenly be true. "Okay, I've been pretty patient," Grady said, taking her hands and waiting for her to look at him. "But you're going to have to tell me what's going on." She knew he was right, but this was too huge, too life-changing. It would shred his heart into itty bitty pieces. "Please tell me, Sophie. I need to know." "I know," she whispered, smearing away tears, but she still couldn't look at him. "Who is the pyrokinetic? Just say it really fast." She tightened her grip on him, knowing they'd both need something to hold on to if she was going to do this. Grady curled his fingers around hers and she took deep breath, choking down the bile in her throat as she whispered, "Brandt." Grady went very, very still. It felt like time had stopped, like the entire universe was resting on the edge of nothingness, ready to topple over any second. But Grady's voice was soft, barely even audible, as he let go of her and said, "I have to go." "Where?" Sophie asked, stumbling into her nearest pair of shoes as she ran after him. She wasn't surprised that he went up the stairs instead of down, nor when he stepped under the crystals of the Leap Master and called for Brandt's house. But she couldn't let him go. "You can't do this, Grady," she begged, running to his side. "Believe me, I can." He moved to step into the light, but Sophie grabbed his arm, dragging him back. "I might be wrong." "Are you?" he asked. She rubbed her wrist, remembering the sting of Brandt's last burn, and she replayed the memory she'd seen in his mind of the fire, the way the flames had exploded so strongly, so suddenly. Why had Brandt been knocked back to safety while Julie had been surrounded? It only made sense if he sparked the fire. "It's true," she whispered. "Then let me go." "But he probably won't even be there," she reminded him. "I'm sure he'll be with others on Mount Everest." "Maybe," Grade agreed, "but I'll be waiting for him in case he gets away." When she still didn't let go, his expression became dull and rigid, like he turned to stone. "Don't make me force you to let go, Sophie." She realized what he meant and dropped his hand. "Don't tell Edeline," he whispered. She lunged for him as she stepped into the light, not entirely sure what she was doing. She had just enough time to hope Brandt wouldn't be there, then the force of the light ripped them away. "You shouldn't have done that," Grady shouted as they reappeared on the rocky ground of the cold, bleak cliff. "Go home now. Not without you." "Trust me, Sophie, you don't want to be here for this." She shivered as she turned to face Brandt's square, windowless house. The house Grady and Edeline had built to accommodate his every need. The house they'd visited every year, bringing him his favorite cookies, treating him like a son. 16 years, Grady said, picking up a stone and hurling it at a wall. It crashed with a thunderous clang and shattered to a dozen pieces. Sophie froze, waiting for Brandt to slam open the door and confront them. But the door stayed sealed, and the house remained eerie silent. Nothing but the roar of the icy wind and the crashes and bangs as Grady threw stone after stone after stone. Finally, out of breath and out of stones, he turned away to dry his tears with his sleeve. Sophie strangled him with a hug, hoping if she held him tight enough, she could keep him together. "All this time," he whispered, "I thought he was broken by his grief." Maybe he was. She could still see Brandt cowering in the corner, cradling Jodie's spin in his hand, and had written her hundreds and hundreds of love poems and letters. What if it was an accident? She asked quietly. She knew better than anyone how unstable pyrokinetics could be, and he'd ended up burning himself. What if he lost control of his temper and the fire just happened? "I love this about you, Sophie," Grady said, brushing his fingers over her head, careful to avoid her circlet. "You always hope for the best. But what if I'm right? Even if you are, and I don't think that's the case, how was what he did to you an accident?" He pulled away, taking her hands and tracing his fingers over her wrists that had taken Mr. Forkel over an hour to heal. Maybe, well, I guess this means no more custard bursts, a bitter voice said behind him. Grady's grip was like a vice as he pulled Sophie behind him and turned to face Brandt. Brandt leaned against the metal door, looking perfectly at ease in his strange yellow-orange robe, like he'd known this day would come and had been preparing for it. I guess there's no need to pretend anymore, is there? He asked, switching to the hollow, raspy voice Sophie would recognize anywhere. His scarred lips curled with the hint of a smile as he met her eyes. What, not happy to see me again? And here I thought you were working so hard to find me. Actually, I was working to stop you, she told him. And that hasn't gone very well either, has it? He traced his fingers across his forehead, miming her circlet. I must say that contraption is the only good decision the council's ever made. Well, that and having you heal Finton both worked out very well for me. His grin made Sophie want to vomit. Watch yourself, Brandt, Grady warned him. Why? So I can wait another 16 years for you to figure out what's going on? Tell me this, what do you think I do all day? Sit in this cold box of a house, staring at the walls, waiting for my annual visit? Actually, I get out all the time. It's amazing how much a little ash helps me slip past goblins. Sophie sucked in a breath. You were the intruder who left the footprint in the pastures, and you've been to the sanctuary, haven't you? His smug smile was the only answer he gave. What do you want with Sylvanie? She demanded, wishing Grady hadn't used up all the rocks to throw at him. A creature the council will do anything to keep alive? Brandt asked. Whatever would I do with that? Before Sophie could reply, Brandt's fist flew up, punching himself in the face. He stumbled backward, crashing into the wall, and when he righted himself, there, there were red streams dripping down his scarred chin. I wouldn't do that again if I were you, he warned Grady. Or else what? Grady asked, making Brandt elbow himself in the stomach so hard he doubled over. You're not fooling anyone, Brandt. I've seen the madness you're hiding beneath the surface. I've watched you clawing at the walls and slithering on your belly and collapse in a puddle of your own drool. Brand's teeth were smeared with red as he smiled. Or maybe I just wanted to see if you'd mop up my spit. That earned him two more self-punches to the face, but the pain only made him laugh. Does that make you feel better, Grady? Nothing will ever make me feel better. Grady snarled. You've stolen everything. Everything was stolen from me. The outburst left Brandt panting for breath, and he clutched his chest, staring at the pale, empty sky. All I ever wanted was to take my rightful place in society, but the council wouldn't let me because they were too scared of this. He snapped his fingers and red-orange flames sparked across his hand, crawling over his skin. Look at you, both cower, he said as he held his palm out to them. Can't you see the beauty of it? This is a gift. Fire destroys everything it touches. Sophie reminded him as she watched the flames flicker and dance. Not me. He waved his hand, showing how the skin wasn't melting. Yes, it did. I saw the letters you wrote Jolie. I know how much you loved her. I did. He curled his fingers into a fist, snuffing out the flames. But the council and the Black Swan poisoned her against me. She wasn't against you, Sophie told him. I read her journal. She defended you, even at the end, when she knew what you were. What I am? Brandt said calmly. Is a visionary. No, you're a murderer, Grady shouted, and I won't let you get away with it anymore. I'd like to see you stop me. Before Sophie could blink, Brad curled his fingers at the sky and hissed some sort of word, throwing down a basketball-sized spear of Everblaze. Enough! Grady told him, his voice unnaturally calm as Brand froze like someone had just hit the pause button. The Everblaze hovered above Brand's palm like a tiny burning star, bathing him in the flickering neon yellow glow. Put it out, Grady demanded. Brand managed a crook smirk back at him. I'd like to see you make me. Oh, I can. Brand's smirk morphed into horror as his free arm rose in a slow, deliberate motion and shoved his hand into the center of the ball of Everblaze. Stop! Sophie shouted as Brand screamed. He can stop himself, Grady told her. He just has to put out the flame. Never. Brand spit through gritted teeth. Then you can burn. Brand's screams grew louder and Sophie covered her ears, but she could still hear the agonizing wails echoing off the rock face, and the rotten, sickeningly sweet smell of burning flesh was inescapable. Please, Grady, Sophie begged, but Grady didn't so much as flinch. It wasn't until she squeezed his arm and whispered, Jolie wouldn't want this, that he lowered his head and Brand's screams were faded into muffled whimpers. You should go, Sophie, Grady told her as his whole body started to shake. Not without you. I have to finish this first. How? She asked him. If you don't stop now, you'll end up just like him. Listen to her, Brunt mumbled, slowly pulling himself to his feet. Sophie avoided looking at his hand, not wanting to see the damage the Everblaze had done. She's such a smart little weapon. I'm not a weapon, Sophie snapped. Not anymore, Brandt agreed, whipping his arm and launching the Everblaze at her head. Sophie dropped to her stomach, feeling the edges of her hair singe from the heat as the fireball streaked above her, missing her by inches. She covered her face, preparing for a second attack, but Brandt had gone quiet. Everything was silent except the tongues of yellow flame licking across the jagged rock wall behind her, spreading into a wild blaze. Grady? Sophie shouted, realizing he was no longer beside her. She pulled herself to her feet, squinting through the thick smoke to spot two figures standing near the edge of the cliff. Stop! Sophie screamed, racing to Grady's side. He froze her before she could reach him, stopping her mid-lunge like she'd been grabbed by an alien tractor beam. You don't want to do this, Dad. No, he agreed, but I have to. It's the only way to keep you safe. Brand itched another step forward, sending a shower of pebbles toppling over the edge. Stop! Sophie screamed again. Just let the council take him away. So he can end up like Finton? They'll never do what needs to be done, and he'll find a way to burn again. I can burn now, Brandt hissed a command, and Everblaze snaked to his side, swirling into a massive fireball above them. Let me go, or I'll make it rain on all of us. You'll never get the chance, Grady promised. Oh, I will. The fireball sank lower, making Grady duck. Just give me a reason, Grady, and we all go up in flames, and moving Sophie counts. He added, dropping the fire lower still, forcing Grady to duck. If she goes, we all go, or you can admit you've lost and let me go free. I can make you want to surrender, Grady snapped back. Can you? He laughed as Grady gasped and rubbed his head. Looks like you can't. Guess there's an advantage to having a few cracks in the old brain. I will never let you go, Brandt. Well, then you can sacrifice another daughter. Then the choice is up to you. No, Sophie realized it was up to her. If she let Grady kill Brandt, she'd lose him in the process, and that was a risk she wasn't willing to take. She had to make him change his mind, and she was pretty sure she knew how. Assuming Bronte was right about the heart being the secret to inflicting. She closed her eyes, trying to tune out the chaos and focus on her memories of love. Her brain didn't want to focus, but she let her heart swell with feelings, the warm burst when Grady and Edeline had told her they loved her, the trust and faith she'd felt the day they adopted her, and the sweet relief of the moment she'd first called them Mom and Dad. She felt her love for her human family too, all the smiles and kisses and late-night back rubs to help her sleep. She could feel the last hug she gave them before she said goodbye forever, and the gentle strength of Fitz's shoulder as he held her and let her cry and promised her everything would be okay. She could feel herself clinging to Dex as they escaped together, and the pride and gratitude she'd felt as she watched Kif fight to protect her outside the dark, treacherous cave. She even felt the calm respect for Biana, who always came back, no matter how much they'd fought, and the comfort and happiness Sylvanie and Iggy had brought into her life. Each feeling rushed through her like a summer breeze, and she swirled them together, letting them spin into a mental storm. The energy was wild and unruly, but powerful. So powerful. It was the most powerful force she'd ever felt, and as it surged inside her mind, she knew nothing could hold it back. Certainly not a silly circle of metal. She took a deep breath, readying her body to grab Grady as soon as his mesmer was lifted. Then she opened her eyes and shoved the warm energy out of her mind. Grady groaned as the wave hit him, and Sophie tackled him, rolling him away as the fireball crashed down beside them. She lost sight of Brandt in the wall of flames, but she had bigger problems to worry about. Grady had gone limp in her arms, and his cloak was already burning. She tore off the flaming fabric and tossed it away, then grabbed Grady's arms and dragged him as fast as she could move him. The Everblaze was spreading, but the winds were in her favor, and she dropped him behind a giant boulder, checking his pulse and making sure he was still breathing. You should have let him kill me. Sophie spun around to find Brandt standing behind her, his blood-streaked face as wild as the fire behind him. One of his hands was gone. The singed stump was wrapped in orange cloth he'd torn from his robe. The other hand controlled another burning sphere of Everblaze. His scarred, bloody lip curled with a smile as he told her, "Now I get to finish this."